So my book really comes in the following context. You see, for many decades after the war, there was this very widely accepted secularization theory that the more we modernize, the more religion declines, faith, practice becomes less and less, a kind of simple unilinear causal relation. And then after about 1980, everybody was beginning to say this doesn't really work, there's all sorts of exceptions, it doesn't stand up, but nobody had a real sort of alternative story. And so I thought I would try and put forward an alternative story. And I know it's full of holes and full of difficulty and very incomplete, but it would be a start discussion going. But from the beginning, I thought this has got to be a story of a different kind, because the earlier secularization theory was absolutely universal. It was thought that maybe this process is happening now in Europe and in the West, and later on it will happen in India, etc. But it was supposed to be the same process, the same law. Modernization produces secularity. And I thought that doesn't work that way. There's such differences in civilizations that we can't even think of universal history now, universal theory. So what we need is, if you like, case studies, and this is kind of a very big case study because it's maybe already itself too broad, it covers the West in general, but I felt at least it will only claim to cover this. So it's an attempt to look at Latin Christendom and some successor societies from this point of view. The second thing that gets broken up, so we break up the subject and we look at certain areas, and maybe at the end of all this, we'll be able to put together a more global secularization theory. The second thing, whether it's kind of breaking up, is that I saw that there were different aspects of secularization or secularity, and that people have been talking about two, but there was a third we hadn't really been taking into account. The two people already talked about a lot is secularization as the evacuation of religion from public space, or anyway from authoritative control of other spheres of life. That's one of them. The other is, of course, decline of faith and practice, which has occurred in many societies. But I thought there's a third interesting feature of secularity, which is the whole surrounding condition of understanding in which people either take up a faith position or abandon a faith position or change faith positions or move outside of or against religion and so on. The whole context in which people, as it were, exercise options today, which is something very common. You find people changing their views and the majority-minority moving around because people change. So I wanted to characterize this as the conditions of belief, the conditions in which people take up options today, which are very different from the ones later on. So the third feature of the book is trying to define these conditions of belief, which have been very well summed up by a German sociologist more recently, Hans Joas. Faith is an option. I think that's so that's the background. The foreground is what I wanted to see eventually was some kind of similar attempt in other societies, and perhaps then coming to a more general understanding of secularity in its different forms. And since the book came out, a lot of this has been going on in a very interesting way. And the last fracturing that's taking place is that it's evident from all this, the work that I've been trying to do in the Western case and discussion about it, and the work that's now being done in other cases, that the term religion is extremely hard to pin down, and it depends what you're contrasting it with, and the lines of contrast are not clear. So I'll just finish with this. Looking beyond the book, it's a brilliant new book by Peter van der Veer called The Modern Spirit of Asia, in which he tries to weave together some kind of more universal picture. But he does it by taking religion in the context of three antonyms. The religion secular, religion versus spirituality, religion versus magic, And if you begin to look at it in these three contexts, you can begin to weave connections between the European situation and the Indian situation, the rise of the Brahma Samaj and so on, and then the India and Europe and the Chinese situation. So already you can see that my book only makes sense in a kind of trajectory, getting out of the old secularization theory and getting into new kinds of discourse and debates about religion and secularity, in the course of which are the certainty that we understand either of these terms gets weaker and weaker, but that makes us wiser and wiser. Of course.